If you're not their safe place to come and talk, a trafficker will be. They'll figure out what that child wants to talk about, what that child needs, and they will do it. So you have two choices. You do it, or you let a trafficker do it.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
Welcome back to the Fire Forged Leader podcast. I'm Steve Baumgartner, your host and founder, and I'd like to welcome Lynda Harlos onto the show today. Lynda is the mother of 4 wonderful children, now adults, a wife. She's also the founder of Parent with Purpose, an author, and many, many other things. And I'm just going to hand it over to Lynda right now so that she can give her own intro and really let you know who she is. Welcome, Lynda.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad we connected. Yes, I'm a mother of 4, all adults at this point. Thank goodness, because it's been quite the journey. But yes, I am an author. I am a mother of my daughter who was sex trafficked. And because of that, now I am a sex trafficking and abuse prevention educator. And my goal in life is to make it so that no other human being has to put their head on the pillow at night, with naivety being the reason somebody they know or loved got abused or trafficked. So that's what puts my feet on the floor every single day. So being here and being a guest on your show means the world to me. Thank you very much, Steve.
I appreciate that, Lynda. So before we really jump into the prevention portion of the show, I think we need to bring the audience back into, well, you started out and you were running quite a few videos, vlogs, different things about parenting. And then you find out that your daughter has been sex trafficked. So can you kind of bring us back into what that all looked like, how you found that out, what happened to Samantha, and just kind of bring us through that story?
Absolutely. I actually have a book coming out soon that kind of goes through all of this. So we're going to give a quick synopsis of my book. But basically what happened is she ended up going to a party one night that we knew nothing about. We thought she was at a sleepover. And I always vet the parents of the sleepover, but for some reason I must have missed some red signs, because these parents actually were the ones that kind of even lied to me when I called to check in on her about where she was and what she was doing. So she ended up going to this party where she knew very few people there. She ended up getting drugged, and she ended up getting gang raped by many boys. Due to that rape, she also became pregnant. So when she went to the police, when we found out about, which was 4 months later, because she finally couldn't hide the pregnancy anymore, and we encouraged her to go to the police and do everything the right way about this and hopefully make it so this didn't happen to somebody else. The police didn't believe her. They said there was too many inconsistencies in her story. They really felt she was just telling this story to cover up a pregnancy that maybe she had happened with a boyfriend or something. And the reason that they didn't believe her is because the girl that she said took her to the party would not collaborate her story. Years later, on that side of it, we find out that that girl was actually being abused by her boyfriend and threatened not to say anything. And so that's why she wouldn't speak up. But That's what happens to a lot of people is they can't or won't do the right thing because of fear of life for themselves in many situations. So that is basically what started Samantha down a very dangerous path. She got ostracized by so many of her friends, even some of her family members, distant family members, was having a hard time believing it. So she really felt like nobody was really in her corner. She'd go to school and there'd be notes on her locker calling her a whore. And she just really lost pretty much everybody that was really important to her. So then it became very easy for somebody to come in, swoop in, and become her hero. And that's typically what traffickers do. Now, as a parent, we saw only bits and pieces of this. We knew she was pregnant. We had found out that she'd gone to the abortion clinic thinking about getting an abortion. Because of our faith, she kind of knew what we felt about that. But she went, and in my opinion, God ended up putting a couple obstacles in her way while she was there. And she just ended up changing her mind and coming home, which we're very grateful for because our grandson is one of the lights of our life now. But we also went through the possible options of adopting, but she wasn't sure what she wanted to do. What she didn't want to do was be a single mom. So along comes this guy who finds out that nobody's believing her story, that she doesn't want to be a single mom. So he starts integrating his way into her life. It starts by she met him at the smoking area at the high school just before she quit, because then she had to go to correspondent course because my grandson was due in January and she wasn't finished her school year yet. But so he met her at the smoking area because he was there with a bunch of other people that she knew. When he connected with her on social media, she did not see any danger signs. She figured he was just a local guy. Everything was okay. And then she asked me if she could go out for coffee with him. I let her go, but my husband had to go with him, and he sat in the car and waited for her to finish because there'd already been a lot happen to her in her life. Anyways, this guy slowly integrated his way into her life, and it looked like just a regular relationship. And we're not 100% sure at the time when he started dating her whether or not he was planning on trafficking her, or whether or not somewhere along the line he learned about trafficking and decided to give it a try. We're not sure of that detail. I don't want to go have an interview with him that badly to find out. But there is the potential that this was just something that he came across. But because of how he lured her at the beginning, and that's very typical of traffickers, at least the thought was in his mind as far as we're concerned. If nothing else, we knew that he was abusive and came from an abusive family, and that's what abusers also do. They do the same kind of thing. They'll promise to do this. They become your hero. They're doing whatever they can to make you feel special. You'll feel like you hit the jackpot. This guy's just so amazing. And he eventually convinced her to move out of the house. The first time they moved back in with his parents, that didn't work out. She came to me and asked if they could move into our house. Because we don't believe in living together with somebody before you're married, we really struggled with that as Christian parents. But we both felt for some reason that we needed to do this. So we did, and we gave her a 6-month timeline and said, okay, you guys have 6 months, save your money, and then you guys have to get out, or he has to get out for sure. So those are your choices. So they did live here for 6 months, and then they moved out, and it was a lot of back and forth through all that in our relationship with Samantha. The first time she moved out, he had gotten between us as between her and us as a family. There was a lot of screaming going on. She was yelling at us all the time. You guys think I'm immature. You're not respecting him. He's trying to be the dad. You keep kicking him out of the house. I don't understand. So we just thought he was just being an abusive guy, and he was doing what he could to get in between us because we didn't know the first thing about sex trafficking. Well, that's a lie. What we did know about sex trafficking was what everybody else seems to think or know about sex trafficking, which is they get kidnapped in a vehicle, they go to another city or another country, and they get tied up to a bed and they're sold or whatever. That's what international sex trafficking looks like. That's not domestic sex trafficking. And I didn't know that there was even 2 different types. So we didn't know. We just thought it was abuse. So they moved out together on their own. Within a very short period of time, he started trafficking her. Now, in my workshop, I go through all of the stages. I talk about how they do this, and then I use some of the examples that he used with Samantha to show really what it is. It's an almost 2-hour presentation, so I won't go through it now with you, but it just talks about all the stages, the luring, the gaming, the exploitation, and everything that happens with that. And the third-party person that was involved, we found out about this third-party person, but we thought she was just a friend that somehow was in her life and was volunteering to take my grandson every once in a while when she wanted some time away. It didn't seem quite right to us. We weren't sure exactly what all that was. But again, because we didn't know anything about domestic sex trafficking, it just seemed odd to us. But anyways, it only lasted for about 3.5 months. The final straw that made it so that she actually gave in to doing it was that he was threatening her son, standing over his crib and saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to hurt your son. So she thought, well, you know what, I'll do this, or I'll pretend to do this. We'll go and we'll see this third-party person, and I'll figure out a way to wangle out of this. And then he just started using a bunch of coercion on her and a bunch of manipulation. And unfortunately, one of the things we did not teach our kids, because again, we didn't know, was the four things that needed to be present for consent. So she thought as well that she had given consent, and she hadn't. And again, that's part of the manipulation game that they use. So they slowly brainwash them. They do a lot of manipulation, and like even in abuse situations, it's very similar, where, if you're doing what they want, they give you all that love and attention. And then if you're not, they withhold something. So he was doing that. But the minute that she would give him one of the sexual things that he wanted, then that's when he would give her all the attention she wanted. Everything would get back to normal, or he'd offer her some money to go get her hair done or nails done. And eventually what they do is they start conditioning them to think that sex equals reward or sex equals money. She hadn't gotten that far down the rabbit hole on this particular one, on that particular manipulation, but she still felt very coerced. She still felt very manipulated. Anyways, it only lasted for about 3.5 months. But in that 3.5 months, we live in Ontario. They basically had her traveling almost from one end of the province to the other, sometimes nightly. And it was a lot. Like, she was going sometimes 3 or 4 jobs a night. She'd have drivers picking her up. And this is what the third party person does. They arrange the dates. They pick her up. They make sure. And because she was not a drug addict, because she was very clean, she had no mental issues. She had no anything. She was, they could get a lot of money for her. She never ended up seeing any of it. The little bit that he got, he would put in the safe. The safe she wasn't allowed to know the combination of. He's the one that doled out the money when she needed diapers or food. And even with all that, she still came to us several times asking for money to pay for rent or for diapers, because he just wasn't providing. Anyways, after about 3.5 months, she came home one night and he was drunk and he was standing over the crib. He was mad at her for some reason. She wouldn't do something that one of the Johns had wanted her to do. And so he ended up getting a phone call from the third party person, ticked at Samantha and him. So he was standing over the playpen of my grandson, threatening him and saying, if you don't do better, he's going to suffer the consequences. So my daughter decided she just pretended, okay, I will. And she ended up going and getting him plastered, just so drunk that he fell over. She packed up a bag. She called me. She said, Mom, come pick me up. No questions asked. Okay. So I went, picked her up. No questions asked. She came back and she lived here for a while. And it took her a long time to tell us anything. And even what she did tell us was so sparse. And we never pushed. And she was allowed to stay here for as long as she wanted. She had our grandson. She was a single mom. And we knew that there was at least abuse happening. We didn't know how. We didn't know if it was physical or mental or verbal, but we knew that that something was extremely unhealthy about that situation. And we didn't want her going back. So we were not going to put any stipulations in place to make it difficult for her. But as is very typical for Samantha, she's an extremely independent woman and she's extremely tenacious. She's always got to do things her own way. It didn't take her long. It was less than a year. She was out on her own again. She was on the welfare system. She was still struggling to make ends meet. She ended up doing a few other jobs that were not morally okay. She ended up working at some places in one of the major cities around here where she was dressed very skimpily, handing out alcohol. But it was quick money. And to her, it was at least better than what she had been doing. And it made it so at least, her and my grandson could survive. She ended up starting a job with a cleaning company, cleaning houses. That kind of helped a little bit. She was able to work around my grandson a bit more than she could with most jobs. And that's the hard part. As a single mom, when the child isn't in school, how do you find a job that pays you enough for daycare and everything else? And so she was still determined she was going to do this on her own. Well, somewhere along the line, she ended up meeting this one guy. He was an older gentleman, and he was one of her clients when she was being trafficked, but he never wanted sex. He just wanted company. And so when she was with him, they just talked, and he started telling her about his life and about things, and she started telling him about hers, and they just became friends. And I call him her angel. He started helping providing some clothes for my grandson, giving them hockey tickets, maybe once in a while to go to play hockey. He eventually paid her extra to go clean his son's house. And he was the part owner of this cleaning company. Ended up getting her a really cheap, crappy secondhand car, but made it so that she could get back and forth to the job. So he didn't, if I had known about him at the time and I'd known she'd been trafficked before, I probably would have been concerned, wondering what this guy's motive was. But honestly, it's probably a good thing I didn't know, because I truly believe he was just her angel. He came into her life, gave her things that she needed, and just was there for her. And then just as quickly as he came into her life, he left. But at least by this point, she had already been well enough established and could kind of do things on her own. So it took her almost 9 years to tell us about this. And little bits of the story came out here and there. And when she did tell us the crux of it, that was back in 2019. That's when she started volunteering for victim services. And she was volunteering for victim services because she was trying to become a police officer. And she needed to have all these volunteer hours. While she was there one day, and she was talking to one of the police officers there, that's when she discovered actually what had happened to her, because she thought she had just let her moral slip. She thought somehow she had said yes, all of this was her fault. She thought the rape was her fault because she'd snuck out. So there was so many misconceptions she had in her own head that she didn't tell us so much about all of it. The party she had gone to, she did actually know some of the people there. So there was a lot of bits and pieces that she hadn't told us throughout this whole process. And so after she discovered it was sex trafficking, after she started working for victim services, after she started taking some courses with them on trauma, the trauma in the brain, what happens to victims, she started to be able to piece all of this together in her own life, because trauma brain, you sometimes don't even remember some of the things that happened. You don't know why. And so just by slowly telling her story in the schools, because victim services then hired her, she started going into schools, she started talking to the young girls, started explaining to them what happened to her. And the more and more and more she told her story, the more and more healing she got. So she spent 1.5 years working with them. And through that 1.5 years, her and I started doing some speaking engagements together. I started working on a workshop. We started discovering what I missed as a parent, and how we could have done things so much different if we had just been educated, if we'd known. And so she, after 1.5 years, she kind of got drained, and she went on to another job. But she really encouraged me to keep going. She's, Mom, I really think this is a really good thing. And I really know that you believe that turning this pain into purpose is so important. So she has given me her blessings to go around and talk about her story, talk about our story, and keep doing the work that I'm doing. So now I'm in the process of actually working on a curriculum with some women to try to get into churches and try to get into schools and try to do those kind of things to educate everybody, because the number one problem is that we still all have our heads in the sand. We think domestic sex trafficking looks very much like international, and it's not. It looks like a regular, normal relationship, and where in the background they're manipulating and they're hurting. They're hurting our loved ones. And so we need to start being aware that if something looks suspicious, if something looks like maybe it's just abuse, that's bad enough, but it could be a lot more. And we need to be doing some research for ourselves. We need to be learning what all of this is. And then we need to be having some hard conversations with our loved ones.
So listening to that whole story, I was taking notes like Matt here, but we just followed your daughter's journey through all that.
Yes.
I want to hear a little bit about your journey on the outside as well. Yours and your husband's journey. Some of those points that, maybe you missed before, but now you're looking back at and you're seeing from a different angle. Some of the emotions that you guys were feeling throughout all this, and just kind of paint the picture of what was happening on the outside of the lens.
On the outside of the lens, 99% of the time, we were just confused. Nothing made a lot of sense to us. This guy, we didn't like him. But it's not the first one she was interested in that we didn't like. So we couldn't just pin it down to that. But we know our kids. I was a stay-at-home mom. It was something that was really, really important to me. And I was a volunteer in their school. I started the Head Lice Club. I started the Breakfast Club, anything I could to be in the school with the kids without being a teacher and without it looking like I'm in the school with my kids, right? So I wasn't a hover mom. I wasn't a helicopter mom. I just wanted to be in their lives, and they knew no matter where they were, mom was right around the corner and could help. My husband ended up working at a company where we at least could have, we had a single dwelling home and we had 2 old crickety cars in the driveway, but we had everything we needed. We weren't rich. We weren't going on trips, but it was really important for us to be family like that. And back in the day, pretty much like everybody was going to work, 2-income families. Most of my neighbors were looking at me like I was crazy. Why did I even want to stay home, let alone why was I staying home? And so I know my kids. I know them really well. And I knew that something wasn't right. I just couldn't figure out what it was. And even when it was just the rape that had happened, we knew something had happened. And I could just sense that there was a sadness in her and a distance in her. And because she was always a child who was a little tenacious is the word I like to use, but her life's goal as a child was to see what she could get away with. Kept me on my toes all of the time. It doesn't make her a bad kid, because she wasn't a bad kid. She just, you put a rule down, she's got to figure out how to break it. That was just who she was. It's done her really well as an adult. It just was really hard to raise her. But it did teach me a lot about parenting, and it taught me a lot about who I was as a person and why was I putting certain rules in place. And maybe I needed to be a little bit more lenient and not so strict. And maybe, and so all of that was helpful as far as, who both of us were in these roles. But so when all of this was happening with Samantha, we weren't sure if this was just her doing another how can I wangle around mom, or if she was going up one stage in that rebellious ladder and she was just like kind of like a screw you attitude, or like we didn't know, but we did know something was really wrong. like really wrong, and we couldn't put our finger on it. And all you can ever do is try to keep conversations open, right? Like try to get them to talk to you and try to spend time with them. And we did that. We always had movie nights, game nights, and, we would do whatever we could to have one-on-one with our kids. But when they don't want you to know something, you're not going to know it. It's just, you can't fix their want to. You can only motivate them to change their want to. And so I was trying everything in my power to do that. This guy was not nice. But he was a smooth talker to some degree. He was always trying to get me to like him by putting my daughter down, making himself look better than my daughter. I didn't know as much then about people and people who manipulate and people who abuse as I do now. So at the time I couldn't figure out why he was doing that. And it's a way of either manipulation or it's low self-esteem on his part, and probably both. But I could never figure out why he would be telling me things about my daughter to make me think that something more was wrong with my daughter. But he was always doing that. One day he did, we were eating pizza here at the house. This is when they were living here with us. And my daughter had gotten up to go do something in the kitchen, and he ended up slapping my grandson across the face. And
Oof.
that moment, I mean, we believe in discipline, like consequences for bad behavior, but never would hitting somebody across the face be anything close to acceptable in our house. And I was livid. I saw red. This is my daughter's partner, quote unquote. And I didn't want to get in the middle of something. I wanted to give her the opportunity to take care of it. But it was the start of me just simply going, no, this guy is not good. This isn't even just an intuition anymore. This isn't a gut feeling. This guy is not good. I went to her about it, told her what happened. They went downstairs. And the next day when she came up, she had this look of complete defiance on her face. And looking back and knowing what I know now, he had convinced her that I was lying and that he didn't slap my grandson across the face. And from then on, it went downhill, her and my relationship, because then he dug in farther and farther and farther and farther, saying things that would make her feel like somehow we were undermining her. We were undermining him. He was trying to be a help to her. He was trying to be a father figure, and your parents won't even let me. They're doing everything they can to destroy this relationship. So he undermined everything, and she believed him. And so when they moved out, it took everything from an outside point of view to not go and strangle the boy. But our heart was that we just wanted to make sure we were here for her when she was ready and willing to take our help, whatever that would look like. And the waiting game was horrible. And you never knowing whether or not they were actually ever going to reach out to you for help, or whether or not they were going to live with this, whatever it was. You can't force people to do things, regardless of how much you want them to. And then as parents, understanding that the more we would, because we saw how everything, anytime we said anything, our relationship with her got worse. And then we'd say more, our relationship with her got worse. So we backed off and didn't say much at all, but tried just to keep lines of communication open and texting her, come on over for coffee. And we would just keep conversations light. We wouldn't talk about anything serious. One day we were out on the deck, and my husband was watering the grass, and I was having a coffee with her, and she was telling us a little bit about, I can't even remember the whole context, but she was telling us a little bit about him and something that he was doing that she didn't like. And of course, inside my brain, I'm thinking, okay, hopefully she's starting to see some of this. And my husband just looked up from watering. And my husband, I'm the talker in the family, right? I was the disciplinary one. He was the fun parent. I was the disciplinary one. So when he did say something, my kids really usually paid attention. So he looked up from watering, and he looked her straight in the eye, and he said, Samantha, you deserve better than him. And he went back to watering again. And she told us years later that was one of the primary things that made her go, huh, I don't have to put up with
Wow.
this. Yeah. So
Wow.
key things that parents will say when they're set in the right attitude, when the door of opportunity opens up to say them, because when you try to shove that kind of stuff down a kid's throat, they won't listen to it either. But the timing was right. She was the one that was complaining. So then he had an opportunity to say something. But as parents, to get back to your point, it's not an easy journey because she's an adult at this point. She's the mother to my grandson. I don't believe in interfering. I just believe in being a help and an aid to my kids, just being an example and being there always for them, no matter what. And so knowing I couldn't force anything on them, and that was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. That's in my first 2 books. That's, literally our hands were tied until she came and told us. And even when she came and told us, she told us bits and pieces, and the bits and pieces weren't adding up. I'm a jigsaw puzzle person. I had these 100 pieces to 1,000-piece puzzle, had no idea what the puzzle was going to finish as, just knew that it wasn't completed, and I had no idea how to find the rest of the pieces, like no idea. So when she finally did come and tell us the whole thing, almost 9 years later, finally got the picture, finally got all the pieces. But even still, I can tell you there's probably 30 pieces missing in this 1,000-piece puzzle because there's things that she just doesn't remember, or things that she says, she just told us, Mom, you don't want to know that part. I don't want to tell you that part. And that's fine. I don't need to have a complete puzzle. I don't. There isn't anything that goes on in her life now that she was over here yesterday. We were talking for 2.5 hours about something else that's going on in her life now. She's now married. They bought a house. She's thinking about changing careers again. They're thinking about moving. So she's over talking about her marriage, her son, her life, her house, her job, all the time with us. And we have a very healthy, strong relationship now. And she comes to Mama Bear. That's what she calls me, Mama Bear or Mama Dukes. And we talk about everything now. So the struggle was hard. It was real. We come out the other side of it. We are one of the few people who have a happy ending. And I'm very grateful that we have that. But as a parent going through something like this, it's really hard for me to tell a parent what to do because it depends on the child, depends on the situation. The only thing I can tell you that is a for sure is that you have to make sure those lines of communication are open, that your child knows that you will be there for them no matter what, and that you love them no matter what they've done.
I think you show a really good example too of the communication lines are extremely important, like what you said. But I also think that you show a huge example of that building of the relationship throughout the years, always showing that you loved them and that you were there because this man was in her life for a short period of time. And when he didn't fulfill his side of the bargain as much as what he was stating he was going to do, he fell back to the original relationship in there. So I think that's really important too. And you can only have those communication lines if you build that relationship and rapport with your child.
Yes. And it's a lifetime.
So yeah, I commend you for that. And it's awesome that you guys are having all the conversations that you really want to be having with your kids when they're adults, right?
Yeah.
It took a few more years to get there, but it's awesome that she can have that resemblance of a normal life after all that.
Yes. And
So
that's the
going
thing at the time.
back in that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Lynda.
That's the thing. Throughout all of that, up until she told us the whole story, we thought that was normal. We thought just having teenagers with hormonal problems, because that's what they thought that's what we're told to believe as a society, is that if our teenagers are acting out, it's normal. It's just their hormones. They're going through stuff. And to a degree, some of that is true. But as parents, we need to be digging a lot deeper And as parents or caregivers, we need to be educating ourselves on all the other things it might be. And if we had known the 3 things that we now know, I am 99% sure she wouldn't have been trafficked. So, yes, we have a normal quote unquote family now. I thought it was normal then. So we, as adults in children's lives, it's up to us to find out what's going on in the world around us and protect our kids from it.
Agreed. So dipping back into that story a little bit with Samantha, you had mentioned something that I was meaning to ask you after watching a lot of your videos and the background and some interviews that you've done previously. One of the biggest questions that I had was about this long game that seemed to be played, but you brought up an interesting point that you're not sure if this person had started out to traffic your daughter, or if that was a regular, it's weird even using that language, but a manipulation type situation that morphed into that. So have you talked to other survivors or parents of survivors and talked about that part of the story and see if this is kind of a one-off or if this is kind of the normal progression of this long game that they play?
It is a normal progression of the long game they play, but it's really hard to know up front if their victim is their first victim or if it's their 30th victim. So how they go about this, it took him longer with Samantha than it does with most of the other people I've ever spoken to about this. And that is because she did come from a home, where we were there to support her. So she was a little harder to convince. She was a little harder to get to the point where she disliked us or didn't want to be around us. It took him a lot of work to manipulate her mind into thinking that we were the bad guy and not him. It typically doesn't take that long. I mean, it's, what traffickers are looking for are vulnerabilities in people. It doesn't have to be children. Honestly, I know of a 40-year-old who almost got trafficked. So it doesn't matter age, but they're looking for vulnerabilities. And so in my daughter's case, she just wanted her independence. She wanted to be able to move out on her own and start a family. And being 18 years old and being raped and losing all of her friends. So the vulnerability of, a sexual assault to begin with, and then losing all of her friends. And now her life is just, turned upside down, and it's not going to be what she thought it was going to be. That's what he used. It's an unusual scenario for traffickers to use that. Typically, it's more base kind of needs, like a girl might feel she's not pretty. And so a trafficker will do everything in his power to make her feel pretty and sexy and wanted. Somebody may feel stupid. A trafficker will use that and show them how smart they are and how brilliant they are. And look at how you can do this and how you can do that. Or it could be just the need and want of everyday things like food or a shelter or it could be a little bit more extravagant than that, where a child feels like, all my friends have all this, newest electronics, newest clothes, newest whatever, and they feel like somehow they're doing without, and a trafficker will come along and provide all that for them. So that's why trafficking and abuse is very, very similar, because that's what abusers do as well. They find out what that person's missing or what they think they're missing in their life, and they start providing that. Once they start providing that, then they start showing this person that they're the person they can count on, not anybody else that's in their lives. And your parents wouldn't let you buy that sexy dress. Your parents wouldn't buy you that newest phone. Your parents wouldn't do this, that, or the other thing, and I will. And then that's when the manipulation and mind games really start. So then that's part of the long game. That first initial thing, is usually much easier than it was with my daughter. And we're not sure if he was just not as professional as some of the other ones are out there, or whether or not it's just because she's tenacious. And it just took him a lot longer to be able to break down her barriers, her moral code, her relationships that she did have that were solid at the time, and actually wedge himself in there. So uh, I think that 90% of the time we have a society where people want more than they have, so it's easy to be vulnerable to somebody like that, or even just the basic necessities of life. I mean, we know for a fact that most of the people who are trafficked are ones that are drug addicts, they're homeless, they're immigrants, they come from split families where parents are not paying attention, or they've already been sexually abused of some sort. So Samantha only had one of those, which was being sexually abused at that party. But then she had, after that, that's when she started getting bullied at school. That's when the isolation started really happening. And that's the only reason why he was able to get a foothold in there. So the stories, I mean, in the long run, I mean, you're asking about the long game and about the different types of people out there. They all go about it the same way. They all are looking for their vulnerabilities or how they can fulfill a need. Some just take longer than others. Some are just starting out and so aren't as good at it as others. So in the long run, a lot of domestic sex trafficking that's happening here locally are pimps who are, it looks like a relationship at the beginning. We call them Romeo pimps because they look like a relationship. And quite often they have like anywhere from 5 to 30 girls, if not more. Very rarely do they have it where they're part-time ones where they only have 1 or 2 girls, like my daughter's trafficker.
That's an interesting point that you just brought up that I had been thinking about, how many girls that they'd have online at one time, because this guy was living in your home. So I would imagine that, he was leaving for long periods of time and, dealing with everything else on the outskirt. But his primary focus was probably your daughter, to put it bluntly, break her like a horse, right?
Yes. So when they were living here, and that's the part we're unsure of. We're not sure if at that point he was already thinking about trafficking her, or whether or not he was, because he came from an abusive family, or whether or not he was just reliving, that cycle that he grew up with and just becoming an abusive person. When my daughter's very good looking, so it might have just been that he was really hoping that he could, keep her all to himself. Abusive people are very selfish. They're very manipulative. They want everything for themselves. So while they were living here, he may have just been trying to figure out how they could have a life together and get her away from her family. He didn't like our faith. He didn't like the way we lived. He didn't like anything about us. Right. So it is possible that he wasn't planning on trafficking her while he lived with us. He did have a part-time job. He was working for a construction company. I think that's where he was going. We will never know. He could have been out pimping other girls. We will never know. Samantha's not 100% sure. She feels like she was the only one because of how unsure he was about this at the beginning. But most of his friends were doing something similar to their girlfriends. And so he thought he should try it. That's the way she felt it happened. And that's why we think he was just one of those part-time ones just starting out, and she was his first victim. We don't know if he's still doing it. There's nothing we can take to court about this anyway, because you need fear of proof of life in order to be able to take it to court. So my daughter's not even ever gone to the police about it to report it. The closest she went to the police is the one guy who told her, yeah, you were trafficked. So that's because we know that there's nothing else that she could have done. So he might be doing it to other people. There was nothing we were or could do about it to make it so that wasn't going to happen to another person, unfortunately. Except on the other end of it, just let people know about what this is and hopefully open their eyes to protect themselves.
I do quite a bit of work inside of men's organizations. And of course, one of the things that's killing society and killing men in particular is this pornography addiction and, you know, uh, basically treating women like they're objects, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot in those organizations. And since I've been drawn into talking about this more often nowadays, I've really come to this realization, and I'm trying to spread this word that, you know, a lot of these girls out there that are doing this, you know, you might think that they're doing it by choice, but
Yeah.
much like your daughter, are they really doing it by choice, or are they doing it because, not because of their own moral compass, but because there's a need being fulfilled and they've been manipulated to do it, you know, which ties right back into the financial portion of the entire
Yeah.
sex trade that uh, is just sickening to me. So, thinking about it from that way, uh, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, how many of these girls, these women that are out there in these professions that seem legal,
Hmm.
you know, may come up through this route?
I I mean, I can't say for sure. I really can't, but I know anybody who has been sex trafficked has the same opinion I do about this, and that is that the girls who right now are prostitutes by choice probably were not at the beginning. And somehow, if they got away from an abusive pimp or whatever, got back into it on their own because they felt there was nothing else they could do. Um, but everybody I've spoken to about this, literally everybody who's in the profession that I work with on this, all believe the same thing, that if not 100%, a very high percentage of the girls who are willingly being prostituted right now started off as being trafficked. And the problem that men need to understand is that even though they may have picked her up off the corner, or maybe she's swearing that this is her choice, probably somewhere along the line it wasn't. And that's and this person now feels this is her only choice. This is the only way that she's going to be able to make ends meet. My daughter felt the same way. That's why she went back and did some of the jobs she did, because she couldn't figure out another way to make ends meet. Our system, our society is not set up to help single parents, nor is it set up really to start them out on a life when they've been through something like this. And there's a couple organizations right now that are doing a great job in helping victims restart. But there's not many, there's not enough. So I truly believe that pornography is, even the pornography actors themselves, I think a lot of them have started out being trafficked. A lot of them have just gotten so doped up, they're not even sure of what they're doing. I don't understand why a human being would want to watch something that is that degrading to a human being. I understand the appeal of all the sexual stuff. I'm a healthy young woman. I get it all. My husband and I have a healthy sex life. But when you know that somebody potentially could be so drugged, she's not even sure what she's doing, or that she got manipulated, or she got threatened into doing this, how is that fun to watch? I just don't. I just don't get it. And I do know. I mean, I have a friend, Barb Winders. If you haven't reached out to her yet, reach out to her. She just wrote a book on sextortion as well, and she says that she's convinced. Same with Marilyn Evans. She teaches on pornography, and how they're convinced. I mean, they got statistics out the wazoo that I'm really impressed with. How a lot of men who are buying sex are buying it because they got hooked on, like, they're addicted because of pornography, and pornography has caused a huge problem in society, in families, in churches, it doesn't matter what race, it just doesn't matter. It's one of those things that we have not taught or are capable of understanding most of the time, what a healthy relationship should be, what a good, healthy sex life should be, and the benefits of doing it right. I mean, you can swipe left or swipe, you can swipe and
Yeah.
pick somebody and go have a hookup with them. I don't even understand that either. I mean, as much as I enjoy sex, I want
I
to make
don't
sure
either.
I'm having this with somebody that's, respects me, not somebody who just decided, hey, I like the way her eyes sparkle or something. I mean, that's ridiculous. Sex has to be earned. This is the 4 or 5 years that I've been working on this is the one thing I think seems to be missing, is that people don't understand that sex has to be earned. You cannot take it. You cannot steal it. You cannot buy it. You have to earn it. And earning it means that you're showing respect for both people that are involved in this, and you treat each other with kindness and to the point where, yeah, let's do this for whatever reasons. I mean, and putting your
Right.
beliefs aside as far as the religion goes, right? Because there's some religions out there that are very strict of what you should or shouldn't do, and but let's put all that aside. And I've even said this to my kids. What, we didn't believe in getting married, having sex until you're married, and it's because you should only have one partner and so on and so forth. They said, let's put all that aside. Why would you want to be with somebody when you have no idea how many other people they've been with? So now you have potentially opened yourself up to sexual diseases that you will never know who you got it from. That's the number one problem. And now you're coming to the next relationship with baggage because somebody cheated on you or somebody did this to you or you got abused while you were in that sexual relationship, or they asked you to do something you weren't comfortable with because you hadn't learned enough about each other to know what the other person was comfortable with. You hadn't earned that right to have sex with them. You come with baggage after that. So take all other religions away, take cultures away, it doesn't matter. Honestly, this is the most intimate thing that God ever gave us to do. And you have to earn it. You have to earn it. It's a lot of work. But when you earn it and you've earned it right, it's phenomenal. When you don't earn it and it's wrong, it's life-threatening. I went way off.
Agreed.
I went way off base on that one on you, Steve. I'm sorry.
No,
I answered your
I
question
love
though
that.
at the beginning.
My wife and I have very similar beliefs. And, just hearing you talk about that, there's, even within our relationship, right? There's times one will submit to the other, right? Depending on no matter how the day's gone, what have you.
Yep.
And there is a special benefit, enhanced level
Intimacy.
per se.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
that happens when you're fully connected emotionally and just through good communication and
Yep.
seeing each other. Yesterday I walked in the door. It was a rough day at work, and I walked through the door and my wife just happened to be on the other side of the storm door, and I opened it up and she was standing there. And she had sent me a couple of texts that I just found amazing, throughout the day. They were fulfilling and got me through the day. And when she was standing
Awesome.
there, it was the most beautiful vision I had seen the entire day. Right. It beat out any sunset. It beat out the clouds in the sky, everything. It was that look in her face. And I'll leave the rest to your imagination. But anyhow, kind of going back, she would kill me if she heard this, by the way. She refuses to listen to me for whatever reason, probably because
Actually,
I pontificate.
that was you were very honoring to her, so I don't think she would mind that. You were very honoring to her, and we need to. And that's the thing that I don't think women really grasp very well when it comes to the male-female relationship, is that there's just looking at us can do something for you guys as far as just feeling at home and at peace in it. And we don't have that same thing. Like, to us, it's the provision and it's helping and it's, those things and helping us around the house or fixing something. That's like, oh, okay, good. That's our healthy relationship. Right. And so it's, we need to understand, men are visual much more than women. And we need to understand that sometimes just being there and being that rock, that solid person behind the storm door, is such a gift for you guys. And if we could understand that that's a gift, we'd be doing it a lot more. We'd be encouraging you a lot more. We'd be there for you a lot more. Like, and that's the thing, that's where communication needs to come in. And that's where earning sex needs to come in, right? When we have all of that in there, we have communication, we have all that in there, the rest just falls into place. And I mean, we've been married 37 years, and I can tell you, I'm still learning about what makes him tick, what doesn't make him tick, about how to make this relationship healthier and stronger, and you know, not just in the bedroom, like in just every day to day things, and fulfilling each other and being that person on the other end of the storm door. Like, I love that. That's gonna stick with me now. I'm gonna be using that one. But I think she'd love that. I think she would love to hear that, honestly.
Well, I'll make this commitment. I'll tell her about that experience tomorrow, or not tomorrow, tonight.
That's awesome.
I don't know why tomorrow came out of my mouth, but anyways, I'll tell her that tonight, because you know, that's probably important for her to hear. I mean,
It is.
I felt it, and it, you know, it was a shiver through my body, but she deserves to hear that as well.
Absolutely. She
Going
does.
back to the original question, that was really about these women who don't really understand that, or that's not a good way to say it, but they have come to believe that they're giving up themselves, when really it's been a manipulation for all this time. We have statistics out there on trafficking, and
Mhm.
I've looked a lot of different places, and I find a lot of different statistics. And my guess is that because of this phenomenon, that they believe that they're giving themselves up willingly, that this is much worse of a problem than what we ever give it credit for. Would you agree with that statement?
More than you know. Absolutely. Pretty much every person I've spoken to who was a victim of sex trafficking, like literally every person I've spoken to, and I haven't spoken to all of them, so have said that they thought they said yes. They thought they had given consent. They were convinced that the only reason they were doing this is because they gave in. It was them. And when they begin to understand the whole logistics behind actually what happened to them, they usually get furious, because they were so tricked into believing that it was them. That's the only reason why they did it. It's the only reason why they stayed in it for however long they stayed into it, is because they felt it was their fault. And that is pure 100% manipulation. So it is a bigger problem than any of us can even recognize, because abusers do the same thing. And we've been talking about this for generations, where, you know, those of us who've never been abused look at abusers and go, I don't understand why they just don't leave. Like, why don't they just leave? To us, it seems so simple. Just leave. They're in a situation where they're either feeling threatened, or they feel somehow they're the reason all of this is happening, because they have been brainwashed so badly and manipulated or threatened so badly, they don't feel there is a way to leave. Somebody that they know is going to get hurt, or this is all their fault anyway, so leaving isn't going to fix it. They're just going to end up back in a worse mess. All of these things. And so when we take that and we realize that that's what happens in an abusive relationship, and multiply that, because sex trafficking abuses you in every single way possible: mentally, emotionally, physically, verbally, sexually. Every area of abuse happens in sex trafficking, and that's how they get them to comply.
I know we talked about this beforehand, but I'm just going to straight out say it. I think that people that are doing this, they are the worst form of evil. And I would say that most of it is very satanic driven. Whether people want to admit it or not, it is, you know, drugs are sold once, people are murdered once.
Yes.
You know, most crimes are one time, but trafficking is over and over and over and over. And it's a constant manipulation, and it's a lie, and it changes people's brains. And I mean, really deep down, internal, their identity, their soul, whatever you want to
Yes.
call it, it changes that person and changes them into something way less than what they are.
Absolutely. And whether you want to call it satanic or evil or whatever, it's definitely not good. It's definitely not good when somebody
Agree.
feels that they have a right to misuse another human being in any form. We will all get outraged the minute we talk about abuse on it or not treating an animal correctly. I mean, this country has gone crazy with how important an animal has become, but we misuse people every single day. And I definitely agree with you. It's evil. It's not right. And the build that for Samantha to be able to build herself back up to feeling some sort of self-worth, she faked it for a long time. For 8 years, she faked it. And when she finally found out what happened to her, it still took her several years um, to understand and believe that she definitely didn't deserve that. She didn't deserve it. So it's life altering for the rest of her life. She will be changed for this. And some of it has turned into good because I truly believe that God can actually turn evil into good, but she still struggles and she still has memories and flashbacks and triggers that we can say something and I can see a look come across your face and I don't know why and I don't ask. I just know I changed the subject real quick. Try to get her involved in working on a jigsaw puzzle with me or going for a walk just to change the subject because it will affect her for the rest of her life. It's definitely evil in my opinion.
I would imagine that she struggles daily as well with self-worth and, you know, remembering that she is made for more than, what she generally gives herself credit for.
And honestly, I think because it was only 3.5 months, because she got herself out of it, because she's learned enough about it to understand really what happened now, and understands the manipulation in the game that was played with her. She has been able to be a very resilient young woman and has a lot of self-worth, and teaches her son about self-worth. She actually teaches all of us because I mean she's been through the worst out of any of us. So she's actually like the backbone of all her siblings. When they're going through a tough time, rough time, they head to her because she has done very well. Having said that, I can't imagine how she's done it. I I can't imagine it. I've seen her do it. I've watched her. I know she's done it. Very rarely does that girl still step back into the self-doubting. So I know she's done it, but I still have no idea how. I don't know. I don't know if I had
That's
been in the
amazing.
same shoes, if I'd be where she is today.
Yeah, that is amazing. Uh, as we talked earlier, I was born into an abusive household, and I carried that for many, many years. Into my own drug abuse and different things. And it didn't end until I was 22, and I still battle it today on my self worth.
Mhm.
So that's amazing that she was given that gift, or took that gift, however it happened, that she's able to recover on that.
Yeah.
So, kind of wrapping this up, Lynda, this has just been an amazing story, and I could go on for hours and hours and hours. But looking back on it now, what are some tips that you could give the listeners as parents, just to go forward, take this information and actually apply it in their own life, so that they can protect their kids or help their kids heal? Any space is on the table here, but what are some tips that you'd give the listeners who are parents?
Well, first of all, you can never stop learning. You have to keep on top of what's going on out in the world, the evil that is out there that's trying to take our children as victims. So you have to stay on top of it. So I do a workshop. There's a bunch of other people who do workshops. Mine's on prevention. Other people do it on post, and that's just on the basics of what sex trafficking and abuse is. Then you got to learn all the online stuff. I mean, there's so much resources on my website because I just simply cannot do it all myself. No one human being can. There's millions of organizations out there that are offering information, and a lot of us are offering it for free. And so you just need to find that information. You need to start watching videos. You need to start taking some workshops. You need to educate yourself. The online safety part itself changes weekly, like literally weekly. There's new threats out there. There's new things that are happening. There's new apps. There's new ways for the predators to get into our children's lives, and it's a never-ending fight. So the number one tip I would say to any parent is stay diligent. You need to stay on top of things. Don't let it frighten you. Don't become this helicopter parent where your kids can't have any freedoms. But you need to be aware of what's going on. And then the second thing is doing whatever you can to keep lines of communication open with your kids. I have a whole section on my workshop where I just talk about that. As parents, what can we do to keep lines of communication open with our kids? Because our lives are so busy. And it's just sometimes so hard to fit in that extra little bit of time to keep those lines of communication open. But our kids have to be our number one priority. They didn't ask to be here. You agreed to have them here. It's your job, and you have to take it seriously. And that means giving up your free time for whatever. You can't go to yoga class, or you don't get to go to a lunch with a friend because you got to spend time with your kids. So be it. Your turn will come. You'll be able to have some free time again in the future. But your kids have to be your number one priority. Always, always. Get back to having family dinners. Get back to having family nights. Do things that are fun together, because this doesn't have to be gloom and doom. You have to just be that person that your child will come to and talk to about anything. If you're not their safe place to come and talk, a trafficker will be. They'll figure out what that child wants to talk about, what that child needs, and they will do it. So you have two choices. You do it, or you let a trafficker do it. So make sure you make the time. And then the last thing is, if you have a gut instinct about something, check it out. I don't even know how, like looking back now, I know all the things that were wrong. I don't know if there was a way I could have known anything at the time, because back at the time we didn't have courses like the workshops I do. We didn't know any of this stuff. But that, we have this amazing thing called the internet. And as much as I hate it sometimes, it's a wonderful tool. It can show you and teach you anything about anything that you want to learn. And if your kids are important enough, then you'll go on there and you'll find out what you need to learn, the things that are relevant in their world, and educate yourself.
Well, thank you for those. The number two, right? The family dinners and family nights and taking the available time. Another couple tips just right around that is we all want to get on our phones, right? We all want to, pick up our phones and fill those voids. We want to turn on the TV. We want to do all those things. But that connection point is way more important than the media that we're filling our noggins with. So I challenge every one of the listeners, make that family dinner, at least one a day, make it mandatory in your home. Come around the dinner table. There's no better place. And you can have a script to talk about it as well, right? Mm-hmm. What was your favorite part of today? What was the thing that you liked the least? That's probably even more important, because it's the hard things to talk about. We do this every night with our young children. I wish we would have done a better job with our older children, but you can only start from today. So do like my family and start. So Lynda, where can people reach you at? What do you got going on out there? Social media, YouTube?
I think.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't have them all because I'm too old to have them all. I have a hard time staying on top of what I am on. So I have LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, or you can find me under Parent with Purpose. Pretty much everything I have including my email address, my YouTube channel, my website, LinkedIn, Facebook, are all parentwithpurpose.ca. I kept it all very, very simple. If you type any of that into any of those, you're going to find me or my name, Lynda Harlos with a Y. You'll be able to find me in any of those locations. I'm always ready and willing to talk to anybody. So if anybody, has any questions, reach out. I also have those monthly free workshops. Please feel free to come in and do those. I do them on different days of the week. So hopefully we can connect with different people at different times. And I do speaking engagements. So if somebody wants me to come and speak to a group of people, I also do that, because sometimes one-on-one or like seeing me in person will hit the message home a little bit quicker. So, and lastly, I'm working on that church. I have a book coming up. If I can find a publisher or an agent that will help me get that published, there's something else people can, get a hold of. That'll help anybody who's struggling with teens at all in their home right now. They don't have to be having trafficking situations, because there's a lot in there that shows how a buildup can happen towards abuse or trafficking. So it's not just a trafficking book. It's my story of my journey with my daughter, a lot of what we talked about today. And then working on a curriculum for churches where we can help educate them on all of the different aspects, what sex trafficking really is, sextortion, what that is and how to prevent it, online safety, abuse, both sexual and non, that's happening in churches and families, how we can spot it, how we can stop it, and even, believe it or not, some of the occult situations that are happening with some families. So we're really working on trying to get the information out to not just, the communities, general communities, but also to churches and also to families and anywhere we can reach people. Whatever door opens up, we're going to try to walk through it.
Yeah, and that's, in this world, that's what I'm kind of finding. Everybody who does this isn't doing it for financial gain or notoriety. They're doing it because it's a true calling or a true passion into this world. Building this series, to be honest with you, some of the people that I need to talk to are the hardest to get a hold of, because they always put the mission first. Whereas some of the celebrities that I get on here, they're a lot more apt to get on a podcast because they want their name out there. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's been an interesting journey for me. But just wrapping this up, Lynda, absolutely phenomenal. I appreciate having you on. I know that over time, this has become easier to tell this story, or not easier, but it comes more fluidly, I guess is probably a better way to put it. But it always has to have some sort of level of difficulty. So I appreciate you digging deep into this, and really just God bless and thank you for being on. And for all the listeners, take this to heart. These are our kids. It doesn't matter if they have our last names. These are our kids that we're trying to protect. We should be out there trying to protect each and every one of them. With that, once again, God bless, Lynda, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Steve.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.